Welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the very important political situation of the country in our first segment, where we're going to be taking a look at particularly in the aftermath of the protest rallies by the PTI last month, and of course the impact that has created with regards to the political engagement and the role of particularly the PTI and of course other parties with reference to putting law and order situation in control, and then of course also engage with each other politically is very, very important. We saw in the parliament that there was discussions from both the sides with regards to how negotiations and dialogue need to take place, with of course mentions of the committee that had been formed by the PTI previously for engagement and talks with the government, and then of course with Women leader Rana Sanaullah also pointing towards how that channel can be used, and this is something that needs to be put forward by the PTI if it does truly want to engage in talks. At the same time, of course, we saw other leaders pointing out the fact that this cannot be done at gunpoint, and that this cannot be done with regards to a political party that engages in civil disobedience. We also had the PTI side talking about how there needs to be a formal recognition of its demands and way forward, and what needs to be done in order for that negotiation to take place. But what remains to be seen also is that such rhetoric with reference to dialogue and negotiations with the PTI has been continuing for quite some time now, and it is important, of course, to understand whether or not that will truly take place in terms of the grievances that the party has and in terms of the actions that is taken, particularly May 9th previously as well, and then of course with different protest rallies and narratives that have been put forward, not to mention of course the campaigns on social media, and then of course with the fact that their founding leader is of course in jail at the moment with a number of cases against him. So it's important to take a look at and be cognizant of the current scenario and whether or not we can actually move forwards towards political engagement in this regard. That will be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to be taking a look at the economy and in the ways that we are going to be dealing with the indicators that represent a move in the right direction. We have a cut from the State Bank with regards to the policy rate, which is now down to 13%. And we also have industry leaders, particularly in Karachi, speaking about how that is not enough and is insufficient in terms of the cut that it has put forward to. But whether or not that is actually the case, and does it truly represent and reflect the ways in which inflation has changed, particularly also core inflation, and how that's going to impact the industry and the market as we move ahead, is something that remains to be seen. And so we're going to be also taking a closer look at this particular decision and what it means in terms of the future trajectory of the economy of Pakistan. For this and more, as always in the debate, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by political analyst Dr. Niaz Murtaza. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'll start with you with what we know and what we can understand about where the PTI stands at the moment. And we've, of course, just seen the kind of protest rallies that have happened in last month, but we've also seen previous engagements. So I want your perspective on what you understand and make of this talk of negotiations and dialogue that we saw in the parliament yesterday.
Thank you very much. It's been months and months, and I remember it. I've done at least 3 or 4 programs with you over that period, where we've always been discussing about the need for dialogue, and then you see a little bit of hope coming, where both sides give the right kind of message about the importance of holding a dialogue and putting the past behind us, and some degree of seriousness, sincerity coming from both sides, and then suddenly something happens, and then it's all topsy turvy again, and it's all everybody at each other's uh, throats and stuff. So it's really very hard to figure out what is going on. Over the last 1 or 2 days, again, there does seem to be some hope. Senior ministers talking about, waiting for the right messages from PTI. Then, some people, at least from PTI, reciprocating from them. But, I still am not sure whether, any of this is going to, transform into serious dialogue very soon or not. And I think from what I can see, there's just too much mistrust, distrust, too many sensitive issues where there isn't room for enough give and take on both sides. So, for example, a key demand from PTI side is the release of its leaders, especially its leader Imran Khan. But then, whether the government feels comfortable doing that, whether they feel strong enough, and whether they can trust a PTI and Imran Khan enough to release him, not knowing whether they will then continue with dialogue, or whether they'll go back to more confrontational protests and all. So I think some way it needs to be found out, so that there are small confidence building measures from both sides. The government starting with taking some serious steps which create goodwill. Maybe it might be short of releasing Imran Khan immediately, but maybe some movement on the reserved seat issues, which shows the seriousness on the government side, that it is willing to go through a process of give and take, rather than just talking about trying to take administrative and legal action against PTI to try to end its confrontational protest. So this is what we need to see, and this is what I would encourage the government to do, without waiting for further good messages from PTI, or some give and take from it. They should take one or two bold steps which create some degree of momentum, which shows seriousness, and then wait and see how PTI responds to it. That is what I would suggest.
Right, absolutely. And Faisal, I want your perspective on this as well, because we, of course, saw this conversation taking place in the parliament, and then we also saw that this formation of the committee had existed previously as well. But there hasn't really been any meaningful engagement, and particularly in terms of the actions and the kind of cases and accountability, and of course, with reference to the founding leader. How will this actually take place, and who exactly can play that role of making that happen?
Sana, when obviously we talk about PTI as a political party, and right now on ground, their leadership, be they tier 2 leadership or tier 3 leadership, I mean, that leadership itself, they are scared of going ahead with any of their initiatives. Reason being, anything can, create a drawback for their own political standing within the political party and on ground as well. Because overall, if we look at the situation is that the vote bank PTI has, that is intact with its former leadership, and of course the founding leader Imran Khan, and that is where it is still standing. So that's why the people who we are relying upon, whether they will be able to sort of come to terms with certain certain narratives that are acceptable, and in terms that they can sit with the government corridors, and they can discuss the future discourse and future course of action as well as a political party. And they being the opposition, the ultimate opposition, of course they are not in a position, the leadership outside is not in a position to take any decisions, and they once again have to resort to the ultimate leadership of the political party. So to me, I think the missing jigsaw we would always find in our in our political fabric, that would be related to the ultimate leadership of PTI. As long as that leadership is intact with the on ground people who are involved in these discussions, then it can be of course taken forward. Like I am hearing certain vibes that leadership of JUIF and Achak Zai Saab as well, Maulana Fazlur Rahman and Achak Zai Saab, they are very soon meeting with Imran Khan as well in the jail. And I think that kind of leadership from the opposition side, who have years and years of politics with them, they are very mature in terms of how to react to certain things put forward from the government itself. So to me, I think PTI, if it can create a sort of a joint or multilateral parties being part of that opposition side, that would be not only a benefit for the opposition itself, but the whole country as well, I must say. Reason being, in recent past, I mean, very few incidents which we have been looking at, they suggest that the political maturity that should have been shown by the opposition side, that wasn't to be seen around. And in coming days, of course, if we want to see a smooth future in terms of Pakistan's economy, in terms of Pakistan's political stability, then we have to have these talks between government and the opposition corridors at the same time going, and them talks should be constructive rather than the destructive. In recent protest, we very recently we saw a protest in which PTI had the options to stop its protest at Sangjani, and then there was another option to stop it somewhere G9 or G10 or G11 for the sake of argument as well. They had plenty of spaces to of course have a good number of people standing there, and of course lodging their protest at the time when we had a president from a friendly country was in Pakistan at that time. And at that time when the president of Belarus was in on the Constitution Avenue, right at the opening gate of the Constitution Avenue, right in front of the parliament, we had this sit-in, and the whole chaos was being created out there. To me, I think from the both sides, one thing should have always been looked after, and that was the country's pride, that was the country's dignity, that was the country's country's pride, as we have always been considered as a country that is one of the best hosts in the whole world. Our hospitality is famous throughout the world, so that should have been taken into account. So to me, the people who are leaders, tier 3 leaders or tier 4 leaders, whatever that standing they have within the political party, they are not in a position to take any decisions at all. There should be a mechanism that ensures that the top leadership and the ultimate leadership of the political party is on board in any kind of decisions. Then I think in that context, when the sincerity and maturity would be shown from the opposition side, I am pretty much sure from the government side as well, the leverage that is supposed to be given, that will be given and provided with, as long as the country is at the smooth sailing.
Right. And Farrukh, with reference to, of course, the ways in which we have seen the past couple of years, and particularly also in terms of what little we know in terms of General Faiz Hamid's indictment as well, and the kind of linkages that have been drawn with May 9th as well, and then of course this nexus between PTI and elements of the military. This is very, very important in terms of understanding where the party stands, where the party's leadership stands, what it represents, and whether or not political engagement on that front is possible. So how does that factor in when we talk about negotiations with the PTI?
Right, Slara, thank you very much. First of all, once again, your question is intriguing and it shows how smart you are. I think these things actually needed to be connected. Look, nobody can underplay the importance of dialogue. In this program, repeatedly I've said that if PTI talks to the government, there is always a chance of the country actually reaching COD 2.0, which is good for everybody, because in the end it ends up strengthening the constitution. But may I remind everybody who is watching, it is repeatedly the PTI's leadership, former and current, that has been actually undermining the civilian side by saying that they don't hold any power. And that is not all, because PTI's nature is such. I told you in the one of the previous programs that while it is called Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, it is essentially Pakistan Tehreek-e-Imran, because it is one-man party and the leader is very important. So what we have seen is a botched kind of attempt at culling, where the leader is sitting behind bars. Information in and out of that place actually it depends on the carrier, and that actually affects how things go. Recently, when the committee was formed, and then we started hearing people actually talking about the importance of dialogue from the current leadership of PTI. Apparently, the PTI leader behind bars, the founder, actually ended up making fun of them, saying, why do you want to talk to Shehbaz Sharif? Are you going to discuss the condition of weather? With that kind of state of affairs, naturally, if the other side is even willing, they gave up. I remember that there used to be a game on television show. The television show was called Nilam Ghar, and then later on it was called Tariq Aziz Show. And in that, the game was at that time called, and now the name usually has changed. The game was called Chinese Whispers, where you assembled 9-10 people. You would feed one sentence to somebody in the ear, and then that person would whisper to the next person. In the end, when you listen to the last person, a very different message would emerge.
Yeah.
So this is how memory works. This is how people's exaggeration also works. So at this moment, whosoever goes and meets the leadership of a founder of PTI, what happens is that they come out, or whatever input they give, they get the kind of verdict that they need. With that kind of iffy situation, Sana, it is very difficult to actually hold dialogue, because on the other side is somebody who actively tries to undermine the people they are talking to. Another issue that one has to actually look at, earlier Dr. Saab was talking about leader being, or founder being freed. So here's the thing, there is a legal process that is going on. Now, if a dialogue can actually suspend that legal system, what would you call that? Usually in the past, whenever when PTI was in government, at that time they had this huge concern that opposition is demanding an NRO, National Reconciliation Order. There was an attempt in the past when General Pervez Musharraf issued that NRO. And because of that, a lot of people were freed from jails without, and their trials suspended. And later on, that was also cancelled by the courts. So PTI has been allergic to that term. But when you actually ask about suspending an illegal process based on dialogue or any kind of interest otherwise, what you do is you are asking for NRO. So that is a concern that PTI should also be able to look at. In the end, Sana, the whole story actually boils down to fact that the establishment or the state or permanent state institutions are seeing PTI repeatedly and increasingly as an entire national force. Because every time there is a foreign dignitary that is coming to the country, they start creating mayhem. And they actively support TTP's narratives at times, or Afghan Taliban's dialogue with Pakistan, or their chief minister in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa even unilaterally said, despite not having the mandate to do so, that I am going to hold dialogue with Afghan Taliban and whatnot. With that kind of state of affairs, Sana, it becomes very difficult for any element of power in Pakistan to take seriously PTI. PTI will have to actually get its act together, stop undermining your current leadership, stop actually giving mixed signals. And then when you were talking about General Faiz Hamid, remember that on 26th of November, when this whole thing was going on, there was whisper in Islamabad that General Faiz Hamid is about to be tried. And at that time, they actually went forward with that protest. In the end, there were attempts to actually hold dialogue with PTI. In the end, they did not listen. Once you have fired your bullet, then you lose leverage. And this is what exactly is happening. But I hope in coming days, when PTI realizes that its leader is not being well informed, and because of that, whatever comes out is also undermining own party. And they are now talking about that. So when they get their act together, there is a serious possibility of dialogue, and that should actually carry forward.
Right, and Dr. Niaz, I want to talk about leadership also, because of course largely this has been something that has centered around the founding leader, and of course a lot of the rhetoric and the actions and the rallies are also centered around him. But in terms of what we've seen, particularly in last month's rally, there was the emergence of his wife as well. There was of course other party leaders that have emerged at the forefront with reference to how they are leading different campaigns and rallies and the kind of political involvement that they're showing. And there seems to be a disconnect also in terms of who really is the face of PTI or who really is leading the people. And I want your comments with regards to then what do you think is the current strength of the party in the sense of their leadership? Do they have their things sorted out in that sense? Do the party workers, do the party followers know who is it that they're looking for and what it is that they're working towards?
Well, clearly, there is a deficit of leadership in PTI right now. If you look at it, you can't really tell who is in charge. There is Gandapur, there is Gaur Khan, there is Umar Ayub, there is Mr. Marwat. But then none of them are really heavyweights. And then, the wife, Bushra Bibi, had to come out to lead, the rally, the protest. But then that was a one-off, appearance. There is still no sign that she's really taken over the reins of the party on an ongoing basis. So there is a dearth of leadership. But then why does it exist? For the simple reason that all its top leaders have either been forced to leave the party, go underground, or have been put in jail. So first you make the party headless, and then you say why it's not acting coherently, why it's not showing leadership. So that's why I say, take one step at a time. If it's too risky for the government to release Imran Khan immediately, then at least release, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. He towers head and shoulders above everybody else who's out there, out of jail right now. And he would provide instant leadership. And he's a responsible, mature a politician who's been in politics for decades in roles which were very close to the state. And so, at least I find him trustworthy. He won't just come out of jail and start, confrontational protests. So the government has to, take some small risks at least. Okay, don't leave release Imran Khan in the first step. And I don't think it really requires, an NRO even to release Imran Khan, because he's not in jail for any conviction. All his convictions were either overturned, or at least, the sentence, the jailing was overturned. So he is now in jail only because of, NAB or, some other FIR, without a proper conviction. So if this is the approach the government is going to adopt, then obviously, the dialogue is not going to go forward. So, at least take some risks by releasing Shah Mahmood Qureshi, and then see for a couple of months how things go after that. Make another a couple of, goodwill gestures, like on, reserve seats. These are low hanging fruits which do not pose much risk to the government, to its stability, but they may provide a way out of this impasse, which on a daily basis is creating a lot of instability for the government. Because this has been going on for over 2 years now. There is this hope that if they take enough administrative actions against PTI, enough legal actions against it, force people to leave, then the problem will go away. But the problem is not going away. It's still there, stubbornly standing there. It's affecting, your ability to take decisive action in KP. It's affecting your ability to focus on the economy, the security situation at the federal level. So, and even internationally, there is, a disquiet at the fact at the crackdown. And we don't know how, there's going to be change of, leadership in the US. And we will have Trump, who's a very unpredictable person. Now, I wouldn't like to predict that, the first thing he'll do is to push for Imran Khan's release. But, there will be a new team there. They'll be looking at things differently, and you don't know what's going to happen. So it's in the interest of the government to, take some risk and try to, resolve this situation from a political angle. It's very easy to focus on, the crimes that PTI leaders may have, committed. But let's remember that, the narrow legal view is not the right view. We have to start from the political angle. These crimes happened because of this political conflict in which both sides have a lot of blame to take.
Right, Dr. Yes, but my question though is, I understand you're telling the government to take that risk, and for the reason that you pointed out in terms of ending this impasse, but I want your perspective in terms of how important and integral that is in terms of a push factor for the government to actually go ahead and do that with a party who's creating those problems or creating that ruckus, or who is causing that impasse. In that sense, is it on the government, and is it really that incentive, that push, that motivation for the government to actually do that and take that risk? Why should it really be the one to go forward and engage with a party who's creating that problem? In a political sense also, I want your understanding without any biases in terms of who's who. Will that be the right way forward for a government to take?
And Dr. Saab, a follow-up question regarding what you said earlier regarding Shah Mahmood Qureshi's release. I'm all for it. I mean, he is a friend of mine. But my question to you, sir, is do you think that his release at this moment will be received by PTI as a reconciliation effort or as a conspiracy?
It has to be done with sincerity, without trying to manipulate Shah Mahmood Qureshi into making some sort of a deal for his release. That should not be the approach. He should be released unconditionally, because in the hope that that may soothe the nerves within PTI, and it might encourage it to give up on some of the extremely confrontational actions that it is taking. There is no doubt about that. The PTI is doing that. Look at the series of protests that that it has held, extremely protest. But the hope would be that if we take some goodwill gestures without expecting anything first from PTI, then that might create enough goodwill, and the actions that I am suggesting are still low risks. They will not rock the boat too much. But if PTI doesn't respond even a little bit, even after those actions, then of course the government could have a justification. Then even more a neutral objective observers might say that now of course it's time for the PTI to respond. The government has at least taken some unconditional steps which are substantial, and then the ball will be in the court of PTI, and then even neutral observers like you mentioned, Fazlur Rahman, Achak Zai, I think those people can also play an important role. Even people like Shujaat Hussain, the senior politicians that we have in the country, even his cousin. So you can't go with certainty. You can only go with hope, with some degree of chance that things will succeed. If you're looking for 100% certainty, that doesn't come very easily. So that's why I'm encouraging the government to take a risk. It may not succeed, but if it doesn't succeed, the government will not have taken a huge risk, which will lead into making things more unstable for it.
Very much, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Faisal, I want your perspective with reference, and you can add to the discussion also, but I want your perspective on something that Dr. Niaz mentioned, of course, at leadership in the US. And there is a lot of connections that people draw with the leadership in the US and our political situation, particularly the association with PTI. And I want your perspective on whether or not we are really looking at the right direction in terms of any change for Pakistan.
Sana, obviously, overall, when I follow the situation, whatever is taking place in US in terms of their political fabric, the way it is shaping, and the way Donald Trump, he just jumped back to Oval Office once more, and the way the media was against him and social media was all in his favor, and all of the surveys were going against him, but still he knocked out everybody, and of course he's back in the action. And this time around he has got more strengthened government than the previous one. He's going to get one, and the kind of names he's coming up with, them names, they have already been, of course, highlighting quite a lot of things in past as well. Whatever was happening during the Biden administration, be it related to the geopolitical affairs, be it Eastern Europe, be it Middle Eastern countries, or South Asia as well, the kind of narratives they were coming up with during that time on social mediums, I mean, that suggests that it sort of gives hope to the opposition party of Pakistan as well. But at the same time, I mean, before getting to office, it would entirely a different scenario. And once Donald Trump gets into the Oval Office, of course, the situation would be entirely different. That would be, of course, country to country relations or government government relations. I mean, previously it was maybe opposition to opposition relations, not the government to government relations. And now I think it would be seen in coming days how it shapes up. And yes, for now there are vibes on the social medium, whatever is going on. Sana, here I wanted to obviously mention something. When we talk about democracy, democracy is all about, a political fabric in a country like Pakistan, where our, it's a multi-dimensional democracy, I must say, that there are religious parties, there are far left, there are far right, centrists, and nationalist parties, and all of these parties, they create a political fabric in Pakistan. And of course, once somebody gets into the government, they start calling the other bad, and the opposition starts calling the government bad, and all of the parties, they keep on pointing their fingers on each other, saying that's bad and I'm right, and they are wrong and I'm the right one. So in this context, I mean, it always reminds me a scene of Scarface, in which Tony Montana, I mean Al Pacino, he comes up with this dialogue. He says, he says something about importance of the bad people. I mean, right now there are bad people. For this side, that side is bad, and for that side, this side is bad. For all of the political parties, I would only say that Tony Montana beautifully said something, and he said that you need bad people. You need people like me. You need people like me so that you can point your fingers and say that's the bad guy. So even a bad guy has its important, and in the political fabric of Pakistan, even the bad politicians, they have the importance as well. So all of the political parties, they should be considered important when it comes to democracy. So that's what I wanted to say, that even a bad politician would be having the importance, and all of the politicians should be given the due importance.
Right. Farrukh, you want to add something on that?
Yeah, regarding this movie, it has been over 30 years that I last watched it. But remind me whether the Pacino dies in the end or not. So that is also important to remember. But regardless, Sana, I wanted to clear decks particularly. First of all, Dr. Saab was saying Shah Mahmood Qureshi is released. I think that he does not understand PTI's mood on ground. PTI's worker would treat anybody who comes before, is released before, Khan Saab from jail, as a part of conspiracy, whether he is part of conspiracy or not, right? Or she is part of conspiracy or not. And that is the problem. We are in a pickle, and this is how things are. So PTI has to first empower the people who already are leading the party, and they can then move forward with any kind of dialogue. And please stay away from all these so-called anti-state activities, because they are not helping you at all. Second thing, regarding Donald Trump, I believe that Donald Trump has two phases. One is Donald Trump, the campaigner. We remember what he was doing in 2015-16. And then Donald Trump, the ruler. When he comes to power, there is an understated, a realism and understated decency to what he does, right? And what happens then is that it is always in the interest of American people, and his relationship with other countries is essentially, when it comes to the approach, it is based on the American interest. So what was happening during PTI's time, and this is something that people forget, essentially he was working with Pakistani state when it come to Afghanistan, Doha and everything. It was essentially General Bajwa who was playing central role. Of course, they went and met with Donald Trump, all three of them, but that time has passed. Right now, his allies or his supporters, people who are going to be filling up these posts, they might be in the same phase of campaigning because they are combative people. They know how to fight back. And of course, if some media organization sadly actually puts out a stupid tweet, they are going to fight back and they are going to double down on what they were saying. But that doesn't mean that it is continuation of some kind of policy expectation. I think countries go beyond. Pakistan's interest has been repeatedly, when it comes to America, has been defined by Pakistan's permanent institutions, particularly army, not any politician. But having said that, I tell you one thing, and this is great about Donald Trump, he never lets go any point of leverage. So, of course, if there is crisis at home, it is going to provide him leverage. Similarly, I spoke about Adani. So, Adani's case, as long as it is there, he has leverage over India, right? So similarly, whenever he is releasing money to Israel, he has leverage. So, Donald Trump is never going to let go of a penny of American dollars or for that matter, their leverage. We have to work with that kind of system, and of course, the sooner we sort everything out, that is better. When it comes to releasing any other leader, I hope that people, especially from Punjab, like Yasmin Rashid and the other leaders who have been really suffering, illness is also there. They are released first if there isn't enough evidence. So there is some kind of mahal, but that mahal is not going to change how PTI works, because leadership is one man who is sitting behind bars. And then, of course, a silent leadership is said to be Faisal. He is also being tried. So, with that kind of state of affairs, things are going to be as awry as is possible. Of course, Pakistani state can, establish itself further. Economy is getting better. Army is in better shape. Things start looking up. Then perhaps we won't have that kind of influence. Others won't have that kind of effect on us, and we can continue without any problem.
Yeah, Farrukh, talking about the leverage, that leverage on a very lighter side, is it going to be given to Adani because we are getting someone called Patel in the FBI, or it's vice versa?
Look, I mean,
Go
of
ahead,
course, it
yeah.
is away from the topic. But remember, one thing that we Pakistanis or South Asians do is very sad. By thinking that any American with any last name, Indian or Pakistani, his first loyalty is going to lie with Pakistan or India, not with America, right? These are people with very distinguished service. I mean, Kash Patel, you can talk about controversies that he has been into, but his commitment to America's defenses and security has never wavered. So, thinking that he is going to go against A, American interest, B, just because he is a Guju Murtaza, again, he is going to go against Donald Trump's dictates. I think that those people are foolish.
Right. There is, of course, also the concern with regards to where the country is heading economically, and we're going to touch upon that quickly too, in terms of what the state of affairs looks like. And Faisal, I'll take your perspective first, because while we talk about these numbers, and we'll of course be discussing that in detail later, but in terms of the way that we've seen the finance ministry work, and we've seen the IMF package also unfold, and then of course with the inflation coming down, we saw now that the policy rate is down as well, perhaps not as much as the industrialists are expecting. But in terms of where we stand today, and in terms of what you feel as a citizen of the country, are we headed in the right direction, and have we engaged with these figures and measures in the right way possible?
Yeah, with the snail's pace, but we are heading towards that side where we can say that we can have increase in the volume of the economy, because Sana, don't forget that we have to, of course, increase the volume of Pakistan's economy, increase the volume, the number of industries we have. We need to increase that, and the people who got deterred in past in terms of investing in Pakistan, they need to, of course, get back to business once more, and of course get the figures further rolling. And when we talk about, of course, policy rate, cut in the policy rate, that is to attract more investments and the previous investors who were investing. It is to attract them once again to, of course, put money through in Pakistan's industries and Pakistan's industrial zones, and of course FDIs, they are desired, and once we start creating then that environment in which more and more people are willing to invest and are attracted towards investing in Pakistan, then of course it would gradually increase the volume of our economy, and eventually as you remember, Sana, even since last year we've been talking about that. Of course IMF is important, and rest of all friendly countries to Pakistan, they are important, but at the same time we have to of course generate the more economy from within and to increase the volume of the economy. And I think all of the indicators which are being shown so far, they are heading towards the right direction, and eventually, I mean with the slow pace we are heading towards it, but eventually we will be somewhere where we can say that we have revived everything.
Right, and Farrukh, your take on this as well, particularly in terms of the policy rate and the fact that we have the industry saying that they were expecting more. Could we have gone for a 5% decrease?
Right, Sana, I think that eventually we have to actually come down to a single digit, right? And that will happen, but of course, Faisal was saying that we are actually, he was talking about snail pace. I'm going to use a different language, and that is leapfrogging to recovery. I mean, when a frog actually leaps, it actually looks around, then leaps again, right? This is how our economy is going for recovery, and that is because the inflation rates were so high in the past that interest rate had to be calibrated accordingly, and now inflation is coming down, so you are gradually bringing the interest rate down as well. Regardless of what industries say, stock market is very clear because it keeps on appreciating and it keeps going up and up, right? It broke another psychological barrier today, 117,000 points. So one is hoping that it will eventually reach 125 as well. With that kind of state of affairs, there is an indication that of course there is happiness, even if it is understated, but it is there, and it is going to actually have an impact on the economy. Regarding what Faisal was saying regarding growth, growth is very important, but we have a certain structural problems. We have to import a lot to export a lot, right? And this is what happens whenever you are actually opening up economy, when you are actually encouraging growth. What happens is that your import bill actually ends up being exceeding your export bill. And that would also be because other monies are going, because we have to actually pay IMF, we have to pay various IFIs and whatnot, right? Other bond situation as well. With that kind of state of affairs, dollar leaves, and then we are left with a current account deficit, and for that, once again, you have to go for some kind of tempering down. So in the end, what we need to do is first fix this issue, how much import is going to contribute to export and how economy can grow. I think in the past we have discussed repeatedly that IT can actually help us a lot. The biggest problem is we have a sunset clause there. Sana already ChatGPT and Google's Willow and whatnot, they have actually created an environment where computer is writing code itself rather than our people actually doing so. So you have this window of 2 years maximum, where if you want to actually carve your niche in software and AI, you can, otherwise we will be really suffering. So right now there is some kind of time for doing something, and for that you don't need to import a lot. You can dig up platforms and train people here without that kind of electric supply or that kind of inputs.
Right.
So I hope that we start doing that kind
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being a part of the debate. That's all that we have from the show today. We'll now see you tomorrow.